Good. Okay, super. Is that on? Yeah, lovely. Welcome everybody. Feels a bit late to be saying it, but Happy New Year in the sense that this is our first board meeting of 2025. So I think I've probably seen everybody at some point this month, but yeah, it's the first of the year, so that's good. Lovely to see you all here for our public board meeting for NHS Highland, and of course welcome to any members of the public and press who we have with us virtually today to observe. So as you might have guessed from what I just said, this meeting is being recorded so that it can be uploaded to our web for future viewing. Just to remind people, a little bit of housekeeping. If everybody can stay on mute unless you're contributing, just to reduce any unintended background noise. And we don't use the chat function in this meeting. So if anybody wants to come in, please use the hands up function if you have any questions or comments. Before we get into the business of our meeting today, I just want to take a moment to think about those of us and our communities who've been affected by the recent storm. So we know it was pretty bad, and a lot of our communities, particularly over here in Argyll and Bute, have been affected. And of course, we know it'll knock out the power, but impacts our fragile transport network as well. And we know that in our most rural areas, that can have a significant impact. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to say a really big thank you to our staff. We've got people who went above and beyond over the weekend since Friday, supporting those in need and of course supporting each other. And most of those people will have also been personally affected by the storm, so we recognise what a team effort that must have been. And also to pay tribute to our fantastic communities who really rallied around to care for one another and support each other. Certainly we saw that here, and I'm sure many other communities will have seen that. It's really remarkable to see what can be achieved when we pull together. So I just thought that was worth noting. And hopefully, I know some of us have been without power and Wi-Fi for a few days, but hopefully people have managed to catch up and we're ready to rock for later on. On a more positive note, I'm really delighted to welcome to the board, although I don't know if she's with us just yet, Janice Preston, who is our new non-executive director. So Janice took up her role with us at the beginning of this month, so the 1st of January, and has been attending our governance committees as an observer. So some of you might have seen Janice in the meetings as she's getting familiar with the organisation and with our governance. Janice was head of services for Scotland at Macmillan Cancer Support for many years, so she brings huge skill and experience to us, and that will be really positive as we move forward. Janice is also based in Argyll and Bute, so she's got a really good understanding of the challenges we face in our remote, rural and island communities, not least of all some of those which we've just experienced. So I'm sure you will all make Janice feel very welcome, and we look forward to working with her as we go forward. We also will have another non-executive director joining us, so recruited at the same time, but joining us later this year in a few months, Dr. Neil Wright. He's going to be coming on board. Some of you will know Neil already through his work with the Highland Health and Social Care Committee as a GP representative. So he'll be changing hats and joining us as a non-executive from the 1st of April. So we look forward to working with Neil in the future. So I will get on to the business of the day. So do we have any apologies, Ruth?
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, we do. We have apologies from Alec Anderson, Garrett Corner, Graham Bell and Karen Leach. And I've just been given notification that Muriel Coburn and Janice Preston herself will also be late in arriving. They're both struggling to get access in at the moment. Thanks.
No worries. Thanks, Ruth. And does anybody have any declarations of interest they wish to make? Alistair.
Yes, thank you and good morning. I had considered making a declaration of interest in my capacity as a Highland councillor, but having examined my personal connection to the items on the agenda and applying the objective test, I feel I don't need to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. That's great. And Steve.
Morning, everyone. Similar to Alistair, I consider making a declaration of interest as an employee of High Life Highland, but having had a look at the agenda and completed the objective test, I don't feel that that is necessary. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Steve. We'll get those recorded. So ever so sorry, I'm just going to shut my door because there's an odd background noise coming from somewhere. Okay, that's better. Right, so I will move us on now to item 1.3. This is the minute of our previous meeting, which was held on the 26th of November. So the minute is in front of us to approve, and we also have the action plan as well. So I will just pause for a moment. Does anybody have any items or any matters about accuracy that need to be corrected in the minute? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody coming in, so are we happy to approve that as an accurate record? Yep, great. Lovely. And then we have, sorry, I'm just flicking screens. We have in front of us the action plan. So we've got 5 actions in total on the spreadsheet. You'll see that we've got 4 that are proposed to close and 1 that is still in progress. I'm happy. I don't know if any of the team want to come in and say anything about the actions, or if anybody has any questions or comments. Okay, are members happy then with the 4 that are proposed to close? Okay with that, great. Okay, so we can close those 4, and we note that action number 30 is still on there. I do note, however, that action 30 has got a due date of the 28th of January. I just wonder if we're leaving that in progress, we'll need to review that so that that's up to date, so we can take that offline and update that accordingly. Okay, super. And sorry, apologies, members, just to let you know, I've had a request to make a slight amendment to the order of things today. So we're going to be taking item number 10 before the lunch break. So if we kind of keep to time, my intention is to swap number 9 and number 10 over, if that suits people, and that's just to allow I think we have people who need to jet off to other locations, so it's just to make sure that we have people here to contribute to that. So that's my plan. We'll swap number 9 and number 10, but I'll keep an eye on time and I'll adjust accordingly if I have to, so that we can take number 10 before lunch. Okay, so just to check, sorry, and I kind of popped that in just while it came to my head. Does anybody have any matters arising from the minute? No. Okay, super. Right, let's get stuck into the business then. So item number 2, I'll invite Fiona to give her Chief Executive's report. So over to you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, colleagues, and Happy New Year from me too. As Sarah said, our first board meeting of 2025. You might be able to draw a direct line from what Sarah's just said to my comment. Just to note and to apologise, I'm going to be needing to leave the board meeting early. David will be here to cover any items after I've departed, so you'll be in capable hands. So my report this morning provides a summary of areas of focus since our last meeting in November, alongside developments coming into the view ahead. And I'm sure it will be of no surprise that our primary focus has been on our winter surge activity, alongside the ongoing challenge in regard of people in delay who are being cared for in our hospitals. The post-Christmas period was very busy for our hospital sites, particularly in Regmoor Hospital and also at New Craigs Hospital. Our staff have reported some relief from care beds being reopened at the Macintosh Centre in Malig, alongside the retention of capacity at Moss Park. However, sustained focus on increasing social care capacity, including care being delivered at home, is essential. We will of course be discussing later our proposed consideration of the change of our model of integrated health and social care, which is relevant to how we can achieve that. But we'll come on to that item later in the agenda. Also, just to update board colleagues that within the last week, we've received our response from Scottish Government in relation to our options appraisal submission for local flexibility in how GPs can be utilised to support other key staff groups delivering vaccinations within our Highland area. We welcome the recognition that utilisation of all available workforce to deliver this key prevention activity should allow us to maximise the coverage within our geographical area. We've commenced our work to develop that new model, and I would thank in advance our colleagues in Public Health Scotland who will be journeying with us to support us in developing what that model will be and ensuring it's fully implemented. I'd also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge and welcome that since our last board meeting, the draft budget outlined funding for the furtherance of the business case process for the Belford Hospital in Fort William. Our programme team is being stood back up to take that piece of work forward. Also yesterday, we heard a clear message from the First Minister about his vision for reform and renewal of the NHS in Scotland, and we will be taking time within NHS Highland to work through the detail of the content of that in the days and weeks ahead. As my report outlines, work has continued to stabilise our vulnerable services such as vascular and oncology services, whilst we participate actively in the longer term plans for change. I'm grateful to other NHS boards across Scotland who've committed their support to Highland patients in the interim for patients for this group to continue to receive appropriate care and treatment. Finally, in my report, I wanted to draw attention and congratulations to Paul Rusk, Liam Allen and Cathy King, all of whom have been recognised for exceptional contributions in their field. So congratulations to all of them for the recognition that they've received. I'll draw my comments to a close there, Chair, but I'm happy to take any comments or questions in regard of my report. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. That's great. Keeping us up to date with that. It's much appreciated. Anybody have any questions or comments? I will bring in Philip, please.
Yeah, a comment rather than a question. Just that there was reference there to the bed capacity and the care service, and it was just to say that it's a really complex problem with delayed discharge, but it's something that's recognised within the community and in the community planning sphere. There is work ongoing to look at some of the complex issues that are causing this problem, and it was just to say that within the community planning group that I'm in, that it's been recognised and there is work to be done where if a patient is recognised and assessed as being without capacity, then we're looking to raise awareness of having guardianships or powers of attorney in place prior to any hospital visits. So we're trying to generate an interest and work together as a partnership to ensure that these provisions are put in place at an early stage, which means that they don't have the weight that there currently is whilst these decisions are being made or trying to be made, and delays back up the ability to release patients. Thanks.
Thank you for that, and I think that's a really helpful piece of work that you're undertaking locally, and I would concur with you that for any person who thinks that they may come to a point in life where they're going to need decisions to be made around care, that having those arrangements in place where that formal delegation of responsibility for decision making to family or to people who are in your close circle gives you as an individual the best chance of decisions being made promptly and in your best interests. And I think that should be something that we want to support, the call to all members of the public, if possible, to get your arrangements in place for power of attorney. Obviously, as you say, for people that haven't done that, we do our very best to support the procedures that are in place in that alternative, but they do tend to be slower and they can then lead to delay. So for me, the primary focus of that is getting the individual's wishes to be attended to as promptly as possible. That's the best outcome for the individual in the centre of that position. But obviously the secondary benefit is to the wider system, who are able to progress that care more promptly. But I thank you and very much for raising that in today's meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. I think I can recall at times there have been sort of national campaigns and messaging around power of attorney, which is really helpful. But I think you're right, Philip. There's a definite value in localizing that message and delivering that message locally through trusted sources and contacts. I think that's really, really valuable. And I wonder, as that progresses, Philip, we would be interested to hear, you know, what the successes and what the learnings have been, because there will be other places that we can kind of replicate that throughout our other CPPs and other kind of forums where we connect with the community. So I think that's a really valuable piece of work, and it'd be great to hear the successes of that and how we can do that, more of that. I'm not seeing any other hands up. I suppose just a couple of things, Fiona, that I wanted to touch on. Mostly just thanks and recognition. Really, really pleased to hear that we have now got the approval from Scottish Government to progress with our recommendations on vaccinations, so that we can use a more flexible model of delivery that's going to be better suited for us here in Highland. And I think just want to take a moment to thank all the people that have worked really hard on that. I know that has been no small task, gathering the data, you know, pulling that all together, and particular thanks to all the stakeholders, GPs, members of the community, people that have been involved in doing that piece of work, and hopefully we will see success as a result. So we look forward to seeing how that progresses. And just to echo your thanks there, Fiona, to the boards that are supporting us, in particular with the work around our fragile vascular services. Obviously, we sort of watch keenly to see how those longer term solutions are going to play out, and I recognise that there are national conversations that will be critical in that, but it's really good to hear that we have something in place with support of our colleagues in other areas, so I really welcome that. Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up, so we can note the update from Fiona. Thank you. So that takes us on to item number 3. So these are the various assurance reports, minutes from our governance committees, and as is the standard, I'll go around and chairs of the committees or a representative can update us, bring us any highlights, and we can check in if there are any questions, etc. So first up, I have got Finance, Resource and Performance, or FRP. So we've got 2 in front of us there. Oh, sorry, Ruth, you wanted to come in? Sorry.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, just on that particular item there, the FRP minute of 16th December, I'd just like to report that there is an error at item 9, which is the National Treatment Centre post-occupancy evaluation. The minute suggests that the committee took substantial assurance when in fact they took moderate assurance, which was in line with the recommendation that was made. It's a typographical error in that minute, so it's just for your information. And we will put a revised version of that minute to the next FRP committee for approval.
Okay, no, that's helpful, thank you. And of course we'll be talking about the post-occupancy report later on as well. That's helpful, thank you. So I know that we don't have Alex or Graham today, but I believe Jerry is going to step into the breach and bring us highlights from FRP.
Yes, thank you very much, Sarah, and thankfully I have a short note from Alex, so he's given me that. Now we're going to pick up quite a few of these items on the agenda later on, so I won't. I'll skirt over them rather than steal anybody's thunder. So taking the both meetings together, really, I think we looked at the financial positions in month 7 and month 8, and I think there was general comment as to and comfort taken from the consistency and a levelness of the financial position. That's really since about month 4 or month 5 this year, we've been broadly in line, and that number remains in the 49 to 50 million pound mark, which putting the scale of the number aside is actually, I think, broadly reassuring that we seem to be delivering what we said we would do. Our forecast position obviously is still highly dependent on the adult social care position break even being delivered, and we had a discussion about that, and it was noted by the committee that discussions ongoing between Highland and colleagues at the Highland Council, and we look forward to them coming to a conclusion. At the meeting on the 10th of January, Highland brought us up to speed, really literally hot off the press, in terms of a revision to this year's 24-25 brokerage arrangements, where Scottish Government have advised us, and I think in common with a few other boards, that we've got an increased brokerage cap for this year, and that will allow us to avoid reporting a financial deficit this year. So the previous £29 million has now been increased, as Ellen fill us in with the exact figures there, and I think that was testament again to the journey which the board is on, and the efforts which are getting put through there. We did note at the committee that although the brokerage was welcome, obviously the question of repayment remains outstanding, and how we could possibly ever and we knew we were not going to reach a conclusion on that, but actually that takes us up to such a significant number that in itself is then going to warrant discussion with Scottish Government in terms of how that is reflected in financial planning going forward. But Highland was very well aware of that. We got a good update from Richard in terms of the New Craig's PFI progress, and the meetings are now being held monthly. There had been an outstanding issue in relation to RAC, which had been found in some of the buildings, but Richard is now confident that a satisfactory conclusion has been reached on that, or will shortly be reached on that. And we took at our December meeting the post-occupancy evaluation report for the NTC, which we're going to cover later on in the agenda. But as Ruth has said, we took moderate assurance from that, although I would comment, I think there was lots of really very positive messages in terms of delivery of that scheme in that report. And I know it's a lengthy report, but I certainly would recommend that everyone has a good go through it, because it really was an excellent effort by the team. And I think probably a good bump to the reputation of NHS Highland in terms of delivery of the National Treatment Centre. And we saw from the First Minister's statement yesterday in terms of the importance of the National Treatment Centres to the renewal and modernisation process over the coming years. So I'll pause there. Thank you, Sarah.
That's great. Thanks, Jerry. And yeah, lots of things that I'd like to dig into, but appear on the agenda, so we can do some of that later as well. But happy if anybody's got any questions or comments relating to the FRP meetings. No, okay, that's great. Thank you for that, Jerry. Thank you for stepping in. That's really helpful. Next up, we have Audit Committee. We've got with us the draft minute of the 10th of December. And Emily, I'll invite you in to give us any highlights.
Thank you, and sorry that you've got another person reporting on a meeting that they didn't chair, but this was the first and only meeting chaired by Susan Ringwood. So in closing, we thanked her for her service over the years as a member of the committee, and latterly as vice chair and then chair. We looked at 3 internal audit reports in that meeting around complaints feedback process, attendant management and cybersecurity. We had management representatives commenting on the findings of those reports, and we logged and will be tracking the actions that arose from those. There are common themes emerging, which around application of learning across the organisation once a need for improvement is identified, consistency and awareness of processes and responsibilities, and also documentation and evidence of compliance with our agreed procedures. Those do seem to come up across a lot of the audits that we've seen during the course of this year. I've got just 3 things to bring to the board's attention, if that's okay. The internal auditors mentioned that the number and magnitude of issues that are arising from the various audits could potentially begin to affect their annual opinion. And I know there's been discussion around this before where we've said to them, if there is a likelihood that the opinion will be affected, please give us a heads up, don't surprise us with this. So that is what they have done. I know that there was some discussion around the linguistic changes that happened in the past. So just for people's understanding, in 21-22, the opinion was moderate assurance. 22-23, the wording was limited, but this was simply a linguistic change. So there wasn't a material change in their opinion. It was just the wording obviously implied that, but it was I think it was to get away from what they used to call full assurance, which perhaps was more reassuring than was intended. So they now call full assurance reasonable, which is what we were given in 2023-24. And they are highlighting that we could potentially be sort of moving into the limited category again, which would be the same as we were in 2022-23, but it would be a departure from the most recent financial year. I think really the question, there's various things they take into account, but I think the question they're asking themselves is really, do these issues and the magnitude of them look like they're just isolated to one area, or do we start to feel like if we looked at any area, we'd probably be seeing similar themes and similar issues? And I think that I can understand why, on the basis of the reports that have been received, that is where they are. And I think it's not surprising in a stretched system that is the case. So it's not, they haven't said that is definitely going to be the case, but they've just highlighted that that is a risk at the moment. It will depend on the next few reports. We've got 4 reports coming to the March meeting, so I've actually extended that by an hour because it's going to be quite a full agenda. The second point I wanted to make was around just the increasing number and materiality of outstanding management actions as being something that we're going to be focusing on, particularly in cases where the original deadline has passed and there hasn't been an update for a couple of quarters. We just want to get on top of some of those and understand, where we're at, and make sure that if we aren't meeting the original deadline, we understand why, and also that we have a good plan to bring things up to speed. There's a concerted effort just at the moment towards improvement and closing off of actions ahead of the March Audit Committee. I'd like to thank Heleth in particular, and I know that she's really focusing on this at the moment with Fiona's support as well. But just to note that we are further through the audit plan for this year than we were at this time last year. We had a number of audits bounced into May last year, so we have done more audits and we would expect there to therefore be more actions, but that doesn't mean we don't want to focus on the ones that are outstanding, and particularly those where we have been waiting for an update for a while. Finally, and I'm going to pass to Fiona in just a second, but the committee requested the escalation of the fact that there had been a further delay in the commencement of the Children's Services audit. There's a lot of history around this which predates my membership of the committee, but there's been back and forth on the scope of this for multiple years, is my understanding, and the scope actually has now been agreed. It's going to focus on the transition from children's services to adult services, but the specific point highlighted in the meeting was that the fieldwork was due to commence at the start of October, but a few days in advance of this it was unable to do so, just because I think there was a need to speak to more individuals, but just in terms of efficiency and use of resources, that was a concern, and the length of time that this had been going on for was something that the committee also wanted to highlight and escalate to the board. But I know there's been a lot of discussion on that since the meeting, and potentially quite a bit of progress, so I just wanted to give Fiona the opportunity to comment, if that's okay, Sarah.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Emily. Just before Fiona comes in, just to say that that's a really helpful overview, I think, particularly on the, as you said, the linguistics and the language used in the audit reports, because I think for members of the board who are maybe not as close to audit, if they don't sit on the committee or audit reports are not something they're overly familiar with, I think it's helpful to understand the subtleties in the language and what the meaning is. So that's really, really helpful. Thank you. And yeah, I'll invite Fiona just to speak about the children's report, and I suppose maybe Fiona, just if you could come in as well on the sort of the focus on the management actions, because I know it's something we've talked about offline as well. So I'll just hand over to you, Fiona. So
I hope you're comfortable. I've actually, Heleth's got a response ready, so she can probably pick up both of those points. But just to say, Emily, that it is, I'm appreciative that you've noted that myself and Heleth are working together to support the wider team in bringing those management actions back to a level that's reasonable. There has been, as you say, an increase in activity, and I'm glad that we're tracking better in terms of this year's cycle than last year's. So we are going to get a surge, but as you say, we need to make sure that those are responded to appropriately. But I'll pass you on to Helen and she can give a fuller response to that and in regard of the children's audit. Thank you.
I can't hear Helen. I can see that Helen is unmuted. No. Yeah.
Helen, would you like to come up and use my screen and you can
Oh, just a quick change of location. See how long it takes her to run round.
Thank goodness I'm in Inverness this morning. I'll exit now and let Helen come and sit down.
Apologies, not quite sure what happened there, but it's a good job
Okay.
I'm in work, not at home, and you can't see
Yeah.
below the desk normally. I'm in jeans. Yeah, sorry, just to add to the comment. So I do meet with the internal audit team on a regular basis, and we had our regular catch up yesterday. So hot off the press, the audit opinion, obviously they don't have a full view on until we've been through all of the audits. So we've got those final ones to consider. We have had a couple of meaty audits, which we knew about. So, the reason that we do direct them to specific areas is because we do have concerns there. So we are quite specific about the areas that we do want to target. So we have had a couple of really big audits this year as well. With regards to the management actions, as Emily said, we've got quite a concerted effort going on in the next month. So we've been through all of the actions. I've been through them with internal audit colleagues. I've contacted out with all the audit owners. And we've got meetings in the diary to go through with internal audit, which ones we can downgrade, which ones we can close, what we've got evidence for, so we can at least track the progress. Not all of them will complete, and sometimes there are barriers and things that happen that do delay against the original estimate. And sometimes we're a little bit too optimistic with our time scales as well, with a desire to get things completed, but they don't always run to course. So we need to get that update in so we can at least track the progress and see where we are going towards those. And so I am confident that there will be a lot of our management actions closed down for March, which will hopefully be very positive, especially the early audits. So we'll be able to see that the audits we did early in the year, that we are really progressing against those actions. And then finally, the children's services, internal audit did confirm that they have meetings in the diary with both our council colleagues and our NHS colleagues early in February. And Fiona did raise it at our joint chief execs meeting as well, with the council, just to escalate it their side. And there was a real keenness for resolution. So they're escalating that on their side as well to make sure there's priority and focus around this area. So hopefully that does provide a little bit of reassurance on the progress.
That's great. Thank you, Helen. And thanks, Emily, for updating us all on the audit committee's work. I'll just pause if anybody has any questions or comments, either for Emily or Helen, while Helen is sitting in a seat with sound. Okay, great. I'll move us on then. So, Jerry, it's back to you now. So we're looking at the draft minutes of the Highland Health and Social Care Committee, which took place just on the 15th of January there. So, Jerry, I'll invite you in for that, please.
Thank you, Sarah. As usual, we had a very full agenda, and I'll give you the key points from some of the papers. We had our normal discussions about the financial positioning and recognising how challenging it remains in relation to probably two different aspects. The overall gap in adult social care, which is getting dealt with between the board and the Highland Council. But I think also in terms of the delivery of the value and efficiency savings, I don't think we should be underestimating the challenge that's presenting to staff as well in this very challenging times. And as I've previously said, the forecast outturn assumes successful delivery of both of those aspects. So I think we just have to be mindful of that. We received our annual engagement assurance report. Gareth Ruth and Mary joined us and gave us an excellent update overview on the engagement work which has been ongoing over the year. Lots of engagement going on across the organisation, but also I think a lot of work behind the scenes in terms of systems and processes, which I think we'll see help to move things forward quite substantially during the year. I think one of the issues which came across quite clearly from the discussions was as is ever, capacity to do these things to the best of our abilities remains an issue in terms of we've got a small central team, and then we've got small teams trying to actually do the engagement out there. So I think we always have to be mindful of capacity to make sure that the engagement is true engagement rather than a tick box exercise. Quite topical in terms of children and young people. We received the annual report, which was excellent, and my thanks to Ian Kyle and his team. We received the annual report from the Children and Young People's Services to the committee, and it really was a good update, and it was actually really good to see the year in overview, and I think we've seen quite a bit of progress across the board there. We've seen the impact on waiting times through vacancies beginning to be filled. It's a slow journey, but we can definitely see improvement in there. And I think we've got to mention the gold accreditation which the team have received in relation to the UNICEF BFI multi-designation committee, which I think has taken a lot of work, but I think is really excellent. Probably a subtlety in there, which we picked up in relation to MMR vaccination rates. The report that came to us reports on MMR 1 at 5 years of age was the IPQR, which we regularly get at the board meeting, reports on a number of measures, and there appeared to be a discrepancy between the two, but actually Tim was able to take us through that. So, but I think for me it just actually proved the value of looking at a range of measures and not actually just picking on one, because I was aware of it because we'd had discussions at this board meeting and previous committee meetings about the pressures and how we would like to do better on childhood vaccination. So I think it was important that we took that little bit of time. But say Tim and Ian were able to take us through that, which was really good. Finally, Pam brought to us the high-level community services risk register, and the two very high items on that were GP salaried services and the dental services. And obviously, we think about the GP salaried services in terms of the cost of locums, but I think I need to have a discussion with Pam. I think in our work plan for 25-26, we need to start thinking about how are we going to reflect more the service impact that these longer term vacancies in GP salaried services and dental are actually having. But that I only thought about that the other day, so I still to have the conversation with Pam in terms of how we take that forward. So those were the key highlights. Thank you, Sarah.
Sorry, I've got a bit of delay on my button for some reason. Thanks, Jerry. That's really helpful. It never ceases to amaze me the amount of business that you managed to get through in the Highland Health and Social Care Committee. But that's really, really helpful. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Jerry? No, okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Jerry. Next up, I've got Clinical Governance Committee. So we've got a draft minute of the meeting from the 9th of January. And I'd like to invite Alistair to speak to this one, please.
Thank you, Sarah. There's nothing that the committee specifically wanted drawn to the attention of the board, but to give you an indication of some of the matters that the committee scrutinised. We had an update on the vaccination activity and how that might relate to a Highland service model moving forward. We had an update on the harder to recruit positions within the health board and the impact that this causes on providing services to patients in Highland. There was a detailed report on the annual delivery plan with an update on that and on terms of the trend analysis. The committee also welcomed noted the recent service improvements on the CAMS service, but also expressed concerns regarding the NDAS service. So those were picked up. In terms of cancer referral, the committee noted the rapid increase in the number of referrals and the impact that this has on the staff and resources available within the service. And we also discussed the impact that delayed discharges, as we've discussed earlier, is having on the whole organisation. The board noted a very interesting report. I would urge you to have a look at it from the public health team on health intelligence and the support that services receive. This is primarily looking at trends and statistics and ways that new innovation can support health delivery. And there was a very interesting section contained on artificial intelligence and the impact that might have over future years upon how all health services probably across the world are delivered. And I think, Sarah, that was a quick run through of the meeting. The committee did agree not to meet so early in the new year in future years, and I think future meetings are going to be the second week as opposed to the first week back after the festive break.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Alistair. I think I agree. I was just looking there at the summary of all the minutes we're looking at. We have managed to jam quite a lot into January, but I think you're right. Maybe giving a bit of breathing space in that first week just to allow teams to pull together the data and the information that the committees need. I think that's a really helpful suggestion going forwards. Thank you. I think also just to note that was your last Clinical Governance Committee meeting in the chair. Now I'm sure this will be done through Clinical Governance Committee itself, but just to note that and to say a huge thank you to all the work that you've put into the committee. Not your only committee, of course, you chaired other committees for us before, but I know there's been a huge amount of work that yourself and Boyd and others have put into that. So a big thank you to you, Alistair, for that. I know you'll continue on the committee to support Karen as she takes over. So it's great that we've got a bit of continuity there as well. I think that's going to be really helpful for Karen going forward. So thank you. Okay, any questions or comments for Alistair? No, fantastic. Thank you for that update there. That's helpful. And I'm moving us on now to the area clinical forums. We've got a draft minute from the 9th of January, and I'd like to invite Katrina for this one, please.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, another early in the year meeting for us as well. And we managed to be quorate, which I have to say for our January meeting is quite a challenge with the staff pressures at this time of year. So we were delighted to be able to be quorate at that meeting. Fiona came and joined us to give us an update as to her priorities and also an update as to what's happened in the last year for her, which was good, I think. It also allowed us to perhaps look at what our work plan might look for the year ahead, and we'll continue to liaise with both yourself, Sarah, and Fiona to try and ensure that our priorities align with the Health Board priorities to make sure we can try and contribute to the ongoing plans. We also had Gareth along Gareth's been coming quite regularly to update us on various people and culture matters, and this was about the confidential contacts and guardian service, and that was well received, and there was questions with regards to that, but yes, certainly it was a well received update from Gareth with regards to that. And then we had Ian Ross, who's the head of eHealth, along. We've talked many a time over the last couple of years with regards to the challenges of technology in different sectors, both within the managed sector, but also with the contracted services and how it all links up or doesn't link up. So it was good to have Ian along to tell us what progress has been made on the matters that are in hand, and also the challenges that there are just for greater connectivity generally. So it was very well received, and I think it allowed a lot of questions because there are different groups definitely having different challenges with regards to connectivity. And there's lots of different parts in the system, and you can't rebuild one new system. So it's how you get all the other bits to talk to each other. So the complexity, I think Ian is very frank and was very honest about it, but I'm very open about the complexities of it, which I think really served to help everybody's understanding with regards to the challenges that lie ahead, but also some optimism in that things are moving, which was extremely well received. And other than that, it was some matters arising other than that, so that we have directed to other places. So any questions, I'm happy to take them.
That's great. Thanks, Katrina. And I think, yeah, I'm quite impressed how much you got through in an early January meeting. That was really good, and some important stuff that you've covered there. And I think absolutely keen to pick up offline how we can make sure that the business of the ACF and the business of the war, that there's alignment there, because I know we've done some positive work last year, and I'd like to continue that. So I think that's something we need to look at. And I know we've spoken about it kind of briefly. It was probably around Christmas, so it probably wasn't the best time to be getting things in motion, but we can pick that up again now. So that's good. Thank you. Any questions or comments for Katrina regarding ACF? No, okay, thank you, Katrina. And next I have staff governance. We've got the draft minute of the 14th of January in our pack. So I'll invite Anne to speak to this one, please.
Thanks, Sarah. And just in case members hadn't seen the email that Nathan sent round, there was a late update to the staff governance minute on this occasion. So we have a number of items on the agenda today, Sarah, that were discussed at committee, so I'm not going to dwell on those other than to say that it was great to receive a number of key pieces of work on equalities and employability. And I just wanted to reiterate the thanks that we gave at the committee to the teams that have developed these really important pieces of work for our Together We Care strategy ambitions, as well as our staff governance standards. And so there'll be an opportunity to discuss those in more detail later on in the agenda. Other items to draw your attention to, on a positive note, I was asked to specifically reference the partnership working that's taking place around health and safety at the moment, and particularly efforts to ensure the involvement of health and safety reps locally and address work on risk assessment and plans. So that was good to note. And however, I think our most significant discussions at committee were around our improvement plans on our PDP and appraisal and Statman training compliance rates. And in contrast to the good news story I was able to bring you at the last board meeting about time to fill, these metrics have proved a bit more stubborn, and there have been only some very small improvements in our Statman training compliance, and unfortunately this month the PDP appraisal compliance did go in the other direction, although there may be a technical reason for that. The details in the minute, but I think what I would like to say is that on both issues, additional actions are being explored to address the underlying barriers to performance, and I think it's also anticipated that implementation of the protected time aspects of the national agreement will enable improved performance, but both are going to require our executive colleagues to provide some sustained focus on these metrics within their own settings. I guess the assurance I would provide to the board is that the committee will continue to scrutinise and challenge our performance in these areas going forward, and I hope to be able to report a better story next time round. Apologies for the... Somebody's agreeing with me.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Anne. It's helpful. I mean, as you said, it's disappointing to hear about those stubborn areas that you described, but thank you for highlighting that. And demonstrating the focus that the committee is putting onto it. So that's helpful for us to know. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Anne on that? No? Okay, thank you, Anne. And last but not least, and this might be very quick, we've got our Argyll and Bute Integration Joint Board Minute of the 27th of November. As always, we're a little bit out of kilter. I know that Graham is not here, but if anybody had anything they wanted to pick up, they can either pick that up with Graham offline, or we can take a note of it and take it back to Graham, or Evan might be able to respond if there's anything that we need to address. Nope, not seeing any hands up there. So that's really helpful. I suppose when you consider it in its entirety, it shows what a huge amount of work goes through all our various committees. So we are being asked as a board to confirm that we can take adequate assurance from our governance committees, and also note the minutes and agreed actions from ACF and the IJB. Are members content with that? Fantastic. Thank you very much, and thank you to all the chairs for your reports. So this moves us on now to item number 4. This is our integrated performance and quality report, and I'm going to hand over to David to take us through this item. But before, sorry, I've just remembered something very quickly before I do. Just to note a request I think we've had previously, just if when we're talking through items, if we could be really clear about which data includes Argyll and Bute and which doesn't. I'm particularly conscious that Janice is joining us for the first time, so just to help explain that, because sometimes it's one and sometimes it's the other, so we can maybe pick that up as we go through. So sorry, David, I'll hand over to you now.
Thanks, Sarah. I don't intend to go through the full report. You'll be glad to know my introductory comments, but perhaps as we get Q&A, then we'll be able to add that level of information. Good morning, everybody. You'll find the report for our January meeting in pages 457 to 495 of the combined pack. I'm sorry if that's a painful reminder of the number of pages that you've had to read for preparation for today, but hopefully these ones will be helpful. A reminder that the information that's contained in this section has already gone through clinical governance, staff governance, and finance resources and performance. Some commentary you may already have heard as we're going through the minutes. At the beginning of this section, you'll hopefully find the executive summary as being helpful. To note that we've got 7 areas that are now showing in either blue or green, which is demonstrating a level of progress throughout the year, but still recognising there are areas that we still have challenges remaining in. Pick out a few items for you. CAMS is an area of continued focus and escalation for us. You'll see in the detailed section that overall waiting times continue to decrease, albeit not yet reflecting in the breaching performance, and that's around the prioritisation and the way that the waiting list is being tackled. But nonetheless, progress is being made. And we continue to work with Scottish Government around the both resourcing as well as our forward trajectory. So we anticipate that will continue to improve throughout the calendar year. System pressures we've talked about already, but you'll recognise the metrics that we have in the report. Just a reminder, these metrics are only going through to November, and so perhaps haven't quite captured what typically is our busiest periods between December and January, but you'll see them in our next board report. Emergency access, it does remain challenging, both in terms of flow as well as performance, but still recognising it compares favourably when we look at the national picture. And feedback from Scottish Ambulance Service with regard to ambulance turnaround time is still favourable for us, and in relation to other boards also. Delayed discharges, you'll see the report with delayed discharges. We've talked a bit about that already. One positive piece of news is that while we're reporting 253 as the aggregate delayed discharges, that is across both Highland and in Argyll and Bute, As of this morning, that's showing around 220. So we have seen some level of improvement from that number, but nonetheless still a considerable way to go. Scheduled care is very much good news. Our TTG is showing further improvement, and we will see some of the start of waiting time initiatives that are coming in place to help us with those more salient waiting times. And it places us above the national average in terms of performance. It's showing 6 out of 15 boards, but just a reminder that the activity that we're allowed to report and track through these numbers is only consultant-led activity as opposed to nurse-led activity. So in some ways, it doesn't give us the full credit for all the patients that we are seeing, but it does recognise it in the overall waiting list. So the waiting lists are a combined list, but the activity is only consultant-led activity. But nonetheless, that's an ongoing issue, and for comparison purposes, it's consistent. Outpatients performance remains on target against our ADP, but we are still doing some concerted work around outpatients to improve that position. Into cancer and diagnostics. Diagnostics remains a strong performer, both locally and nationally. And for cancer services, we did have a deep dive in our January FRP meeting. The minutes are there for you. I think what was described was a fairly complex picture of the number of different and individual pathways that go to make up these two metrics. The 31-day indicators are showing a relatively stable position. The good news is you'll see in the next report that December has shown some signs of improvement. 62 days is again relatively stable, but we are partnering with Forth Valley, particularly around breast surgical pathways. So we hope to see an improving position with regard to that. Further down, we've got quality and clinical governance elements of it. The complaints activity and reporting shows that we still have areas of focus around that. Complaints have gone up slightly and our response times have dropped. So as an exec team, then we are focused on improving that. Page 484 shows the listening and responding to patient feedback, which is always an important element. It's not just an administrative task to respond to these complaints, but we're actually reflecting on what our patients, both positively and negatively, are feeding back to us. Tissue viability has also seen some improvement in November, as it shows in the report. Finally, our people metrics. Vacancy time to fill and recorded reasons for absence have shown several months of improvement, which we're pleased about, and I'm sure is welcomed by everybody. So with those comments, I will leave it open to questions, and I'm sure my executive colleagues will assist me in responding. Thank you. Emily.
Thanks, David, and good to see progress. I was particularly encouraged around the vacancy time to fill. That looks like it's improved quite a bit. That's really good to see, particularly given the focus on recruitment. I just had a couple of questions, one around emergency department access. There's mention in a few places in the report that the figures are somewhat masked by rural general hospital performance, and that although kind of on an average basis, we're in line with the Scottish average, that if you take Raigmore on its own, that might not be the case. Do you have a sense of what the figures would look like if Raigmore was taken on its own? And the second question is just around children's vaccines. We've just got a bit of inconsistency around the Argyll and Bute figures, because we have an IJB tomorrow where the paper notes that we're in excess of the national target, sitting at 96% for the 6-in-1 vaccination by 12 months. But this paper shows Argyll and Bute is quite a bit below the rest of Highland and below that national target. I'm wondering if that's just a timing issue, but that stood out for me just between the two papers, that in this one we're showing Argyll and Bute is kind of underperforming the rest of the board. And in the papers for the IJB tomorrow, the data suggests that they're actually ahead of target. So just really to understand if there's just a timing issue or if there's maybe an inconsistency there in how the data is reported. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily, for your questions. I'll come to Catherine first with regard to Rigmore ED performance, and then I'll perhaps come to Tim if he's got some initial views. And if we don't have an answer for that particular one, we will certainly be able to get it before tomorrow's meeting for you. But Catherine, can I come to you? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a specific figure to hand, but Rigmore does perform between 60 to, on good days, 80, on poorer days, around about 60%. So there's variation in that. And certainly it is more challenged in terms of its flow through its emergency department, mainly due to wait for bed. And that's a focus of work within the Rigmore team to ensure that that flow becomes unblocked as much as we possibly can. If any more detail is required, David, I'm happy to provide that.
Thanks, Catherine. I mean, just in terms of individual hospital performance, there is variation even within our RGHs in terms of that, and that with the relatively smaller attendance numbers, that can swing quite considerably. But these are average numbers that we are reporting. But thanks for your question, Emily. Tim, in terms of data, is that something you've been able to ascertain?
Sorry, can you Emily go through the question again? Sorry, I just missed a specific point.
No, do you want me to raise it again?
Oh yeah, by all means, Emily.
Yeah, so Tim, sorry, in tomorrow's papers for the IJB, and apologies, I'm obviously jumping between the two when I'm preparing, but there's a call out that says that the 6-in-1 vaccination uptake has been at 96%, which is above the national target. But in this particular paper that we're looking at now for today's board, it's talking about Argyll and Bute being below target at, I think it's 92.5%, and that it's underperforming the rest of the board. I just wondered if that's just a timing issue in terms of which data is being reported.
Sorry, yes, I should. Yeah, I suspect it is a timing issue. The 6-in-1 does vary quarter on quarter, and we've had the quarter information comes out quite late. It comes out about a quarter in behind. So we had the second. So we had the get it right. The second quarter for 24-25 came out in December. So some of the information is that's come to meetings is includes that quarter, and some of it doesn't. And there's a bit of variability for the 6-in-1. For Highland went up. The latest figures went up a bit for Highland HSCP. For Argyll and Bute HSCP, my recollection is that they went down a little bit. So I suspect it's a timing issue. The other issue that we sometimes get with the vaccinations that was mentioned, that Jerry mentioned earlier about MMR, is essentially some degree of different timing. It's not quite the same issue. So for MMR, there's MMR1 and MMR2, which for Highland Health and Social Care Committee, there was a bit of a discussion around that. For 6-in-1, it is really just a matter of timing of so there are two timing issues. There's timing of whether it's done at a year or whether it's done the rate at a year, or so the rate at 6 months. But there's also the timing issue of what quarter it relates to. So what the specific issue is, I'll try and have a look before the IJB, and should be able to and check that out. But I strongly suspect that that's the case.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, can I come to Muriel, please? Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for the report. I do like the clarity of this report. The question I've got is diagnostics and other, waiting list other. There is no text, descriptive text as to insights to current conforms and plans and mitigation. Now, is that because it's such a small cohort? I just feel it's so helpful in the other context and wondered why there was none in this. Thank you.
Thanks, Muriel. I'll need to come to Catherine if she's got an answer to that. And just a reminder, if we don't have answers specific to specific questions, we will come back to you. But Catherine, can I come to you?
I don't know why we wouldn't have that in there. We certainly should have that information, Muriel. So I suspect that's a typo. We'll correct that for the next report.
Thanks. Thanks for your question, Muriel. I'll take that away. Bert, can I come to you?
Thank you, David. Good morning. I guess it's probably a question for Boyd about complaint activity. There's a marked reduction in performance for October compared to previous months and indeed compared to every month over the past year. I wonder if there's any particular reason for this. And I guess just following on from that, in terms of the plans and the mitigations that are described, is your view that this will go some way to help an improvement in performance? Thank you.
Thanks, Bert. Boyd?
Thanks, Bert. Yeah, we've seen a tail off in the last quarter or so of 24. We've seen that happen before, and we recognise that the complaints is a dispersed response. It involves operational units right across the whole system. It involves many teams, and in many cases complaints will involve multiple individual clinicians and will have to pass through many hands in order to get a comprehensive response. We think as well that some of the delays, as well as due to that kind of complexity, have been linked to some of the service pressures, because it's the same people managing or delivering against the service pressures who are also the ones who must sit down and formulate a complaint. That is a resource challenge, but nevertheless, every complaint is important to the organisation and should be dealt with properly. So we have made colleagues aware through chief officers of the drop in performance, and will continue to pick it up now in the new year going forward. So we ought to be doing better, and we have a track record of achieving a higher percentage that are responded to within the 4-week period that is generally allowed. There'll always be a significant percentage where it takes a bit longer than that to get them finally signed off, because without a full and comprehensive information response, it can be an incomplete, so quality would drop if we achieve the time barrier for all cases. So as ever, the data simply gives us a high level surface scratch, but there's a lot underneath it which we are managing and monitoring continually.
Thanks, Boyd. And Louise, did you want to add to this?
Yeah, just briefly, just to say that there's been a real drive to do training for all the staff that are doing complaints as well, so that there's an added confidence both in what they're doing, how they're doing it, and it's less likely to bounce back and forward to get the right information in it. So I think there's been 20 people trained in acute in January. There's dates in the Health and Social Care Partnership in Argyll and Bute coming in the next month or two, just to try and make it people feel more comfortable and confident with what they're doing with complaints.
Thanks. Bert, did you want to come back?
Well, I had wanted to come back, but I think Louise has answered the question, so thank you very much for that. Thank you. Okay, thanks, Bert, for your question. Tim, I believe you may have an answer to Emily's question earlier.
I do, yes. So for the 6-in-1 figures, the latest figure that is correct is the one in the IPQR. The IPQR way of presenting the vaccination figures isn't quite how we'd like it, and we're wanting to get more trends on. But the latest quarter we had available for our Garland Butte is slightly below the 95% target. The previous quarter was 96. Now Garland Butte 6-in-1s have been hovering around the 95% target for a couple of years now, and it just happens that the latest quarter has dipped below. So it's certainly something that we need to monitor and keep an eye on, but that's the explanation for the difference. For Highland HSCP, there has been a decline, quite a considerable decline in 6-in-1, but that's actually for the last quarter there's been a very considerable improvement, and so that's almost at 95%. But it's simply the quarter reporting information, and the latest one is the RPQR.
Okay, thanks, Tim, and thanks for your questions as always. And I recognise we have new board members joining us. If anybody is looking for some help to navigate their way through the IPQR, we're more than happy to help and have some offline sessions on an individual basis as needed, or if there's a few together, we can take a few together. But if you would like some coaching around that, we're more than happy to do so. Oh, we're not quite finished. Jerry, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, David. It's not a question, it was really just a comment, and it was following on from our discussions at the Finance and Performance Committee a couple of weeks ago. I think it was really just so that we really recognise the really good level of performance, which is actually in getting demonstrated in this report. If we go back 6 months, I think, where we had a comment where we had a sea of red, we had a great red wall staring at us now, and it's clear that is no longer the case. Obviously, we've still got some areas where we'd like to improve upon, and it's a slow journey. But I think it really is important that the board recognise, as you've said, the really substantial improvements which are beginning to reflect in the numbers which are coming through. And I just wanted to say that, David. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. It's much appreciated, and I'm sure that my exec colleagues will feed back to teams. There is often a time lag for two reasons. One, we can have activity that takes some time to come through and filter through the metrics. Secondly, in terms of our governance processes, we're looking at metrics up to the end of November. So sometimes the immediate feedback and response and encouragement that colleagues can get from making changes to practice our efforts isn't necessarily seen immediately, but it's much appreciated, your feedback, and we'll share that. So thank you. And with that, Sarah, I'll hand it back to you. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you, David. And yeah, just thanks, Jerry, for that comment there at the end. I think it's a really good point. And I suppose, you know, it's easy to go through the IPQR and look at specifics, but actually when you take a step back and consider the whole picture and what it's demonstrating to us, you can see that overall improvement in the system, and the areas where we're stuck are the really, really difficult things that are not stuck through a lack of effort and activity, but are stuck because there are underlying issues with how we're able to deliver those services. So I think that's a great point, Jerry, and thank you, David, for the offer. I realise, for new board members, the IPQR is a daunting beast, but it's great to know you can get in touch with David and he can take you through that, because once you kind of understand how to read it, it's a fantastic document for getting an overview of performance across some of our key areas. So thank you, everybody there, and thank you for your questions. So we are being asked to take limited assurance and note the continued and sustained pressures facing us and obviously our commissioned care services, and to consider the level of performance across the system. So just to pick up there before I get your thumbs up or thumbs down, just on the limited assurance, I recognise we have talked about this before. It's very tricky to apply one level of assurance to the whole thing. Picking up on Jerry's point, we've got some great performance in some of our areas and we're seeing sustained improvement. And it just, the assurance tool is a bit of a clumsy hammer when it comes to something as this. So we're proposing limited assurance just to recognise the areas where we do still have concerns. But I think it's worth us as a board noting that we recognise that there has been significant improvement in some of the areas as well. Is everybody happy with that? Lovely. Okay, so that takes us on to item number 5. This is our month 6 position. It's our finance assurance report. I'm just wondering if Heleth is going to be good for sound. Just see if I can see.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, which is great news. Right, in that case, Heleth, I will hand over to you.
Thank you. Just to confirm, it's month 8 finance report.
Well, I did think that as I was reading it, as it came out of my mouth, I thought I'd lost some time, but it does feel a bit like that after the weekend we've had over here in Argyll and Bute. But month 8, great, thanks.
Month 8, yes, thank you. So as usual, I'll just go through the highlights of the report. At the last meeting, I reported position of 52 million deficit, which has subsequently reduced to 49.7 in month 7 due to receipt of an allocation that we had previously had in query. That position was held in month 8 and is a small improvement of just under £1 million against our opening plan. So as Jerry updated from the FRP notes, and you'll see in the papers, we have since received that letter confirming that the brokerage cap has been increased to a maximum of 49.7 million, which is matching our current forecast. This does mean that as long as we hold our current position or improve against that, we will report a break-even position within our accounts at year end. The biggest risk to this, as Jerry highlighted, is the adult social care position, which we do continue to include as a forecast balance position within our forecast, but there's no agreed plan to mitigate this as yet. Key highlights from the previous meeting is that there's a small deterioration to the operational positions for North Highland Health and Social Care Partnership and acute services, and Argyll and Bute's forecast is remaining static. Support services reporting an improvement due to release of some of the balance sheet items that we've identified through the recovery plan, so that they've improved the revenue position. And the main risks continue to be supplementary staffing and drugs costs. The value and efficiency savings programme is only delivering 42% of the plan, but the forecast has increased slightly from the last report by around £1 million, and that is continuing to increase as well month on month. So that's positive that we're still working towards those plans and identifying more opportunities as the year goes on, and that will move into next year as well. From the capital position, you'll see that less than half of the allocation is currently spent, but we're still on plan to deliver that full capital plan and allowance. Just picking up on the budget setting, we have received a draft budget from Scottish Government and the letter that confirmed 3% uplift to our baseline. That's to meet the expected cost of the 25-26 pay award when that's agreed and support non-pay inflationary pressures. We'll be receiving a share of an additional 55.6 million provided for NRAC parity. So that's to make sure that our allocations is in line with it is a fair distribution. And our share of that is 12.8 million. And we will receive our share of 150 million funding to support the non-pay element of the Agenda for Change pay deal. There will be additional funding to support reduced waiting lists, delayed discharge, and shifting the balance of care. Further information is to follow on that. And then we haven't yet received confirmation of the National Insurance funding. So as set out in the paper, the finance plan will be a 3-year plan with an expectation to deliver 3% recurrent savings, an improved forecast outturn against the 24-25 plan, and a trajectory of improvement over the 3 years towards balance. And again, there's confirmation in there that there will be no brokerage provided in 25-26. For capital, as Fiona mentioned, there was confirmation of funding towards progressing our Belford business case, and it's proposed to receive a 5% uplift to the standard capital allocation, which is the first time we've had an increase to that core capital allocation for quite some time, so that's very welcome. The plan was due to be submitted yesterday, but we have had a small extension to that, and it will go in tomorrow, and that's been agreed by Scottish Government. I'm happy to open up to any questions.
Thanks, Heleth. So some significant changes in the landscape for this year since we last met as a board. Okay, so happy to open up any questions, comments, either regarding our current position or indeed the planning for next year. I suppose while I wait for people to gather their thoughts and questions, I'll just ask for a bit of clarification. Heleth, the plan that needs to go in, well, tomorrow, that's going to go into Scottish Government tomorrow, if I understand it correctly, that is kind of setting the starting point, isn't it? That's sort of saying, you know, this is where we think we will be based on the information we have available to us now. Can we talk a little bit about what comes after that? I picked up from the report, obviously there's a little bit of iteration, and I'm assuming that there will be some backwards and forwards between ourselves and Scottish Government. But given the messaging around there being no brokerage next year, given what I assume will be a sizable gap, and given that we don't have much time in between now and when that needs to be done, I suppose what I'm just looking for a little bit more information about the governance around that, what we might expect to see through that process. I don't know if we've got any indication from Scottish Government as to kind of what level of ambition they're looking for, and what kind of, I know we were in a similar position last year where we had to consider what we might put forward, but I'm just interested to know what that feels like this year.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So similar to last year, probably. So the expectation is, as I said, that we set a plan for the first year that's an improvement on this year's plan position, which we could argue would be the 50.2 million opening gap that we had. So they will be expecting that we improve our trajectory against that. I'm not hearing at the moment that any boards within their first draft are necessarily reporting that, but I've not seen anyone else's positions. As you said, this is very much a first draft. So our expectation for this first iteration is that we've just identified the opening gap. So we've brought forward our underlying position from this year and previous years, identified all the new funding pressures that we'll have, inflationary costs, all those kind of things that we know we see during the year. And we've currently set an expectation of the minimum 3% that's expected of us from a savings perspective. So the bit that's to come is probably the bulk of the work, where we work through how we deliver that 3%, and we do have an outline of that set out from the value and efficiencies from this year. So we're looking at what we're carrying forward in schemes, what they could deliver, what other schemes colleagues have identified through the finance clinics that Fiona and I have been having with executive team members. And we're pulling that kind of the 3% plan together to see, A, if we can stretch against that to start with, and what efficiencies we can deliver. Then the next stage, and the bit that we haven't done yet, because we've been focusing on the starting position, I suppose, is linking in with the stagger work. So looking at what our plans over the longer term trajectory is there anything in there that we could realise in year one, or if not, how they start playing in years 2 and 3? So that will be the next step. And then on top of that, then we will have to start setting out some of the potential scenarios around if we were expected to improve our financial position even further than that, what that would start looking like with regards to our performance. So we really need to start linking in our finance and performance, and making it clear that impacting, changing one is going to impact the other, and how we manage those. So I think by the governance steps of it is the final version needs to be submitted. Final draft version is to be submitted to Scottish Government by the 17th of March. Then we get formal feedback as to whether they've accepted that plan. But before then, we will have had those conversations internally around what's our appetite for changes, how that will impact our performance, etc. So at the moment, for the first draft, we have gone with the basic, this is our starting position and 3%, and what that looks like. We will be expected then to work through those other options of stretch targets, non-recurrent benefits that we can identify again that we went through last year, and then the further, if we were to improve our financial position further, what the impact on the organisation would be from that.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks, Heleth. And I suppose I wanted to ask another question as well. It's quite easy, isn't it, when we're having these conversations to talk about the 3%, and I think because it's 3%, it sounds like that's going to be an easy thing, but we know that achieving the 3% is really, really challenging, and I don't think that can be underestimated. And I suppose it's worth at this point, similar to what the point that Jerry made about the IPQR, I think it's very easy to be focused on the challenge and the gap, and we can forget just about the huge amounts of work that people are doing across the whole organisation to achieve the savings that they are achieving. And I think that needs to be recognised, and not underestimating that we talk about 3% as if that will be kind of a quick win or something, but we know that it absolutely isn't. I'm interested, and this might not be a question for you, Heleth, it might be for others, but the messaging, I suppose, through the organisation about this is really, I think, potentially a challenge for us. I suppose both in terms of messaging to the organisation about achieving savings and improved efficiencies in a challenging time, which is a difficult message anyway. And then I suppose we have a bit of added complexity given the last minute change in brokerage position, and kind of the unsteadying that brings. And obviously that's really welcome news. It's fantastic that we've got that and we're going to be able to report a better position. But I suppose in terms of driving that work, you talked about those finance workshops and kind of getting people to think differently about how we can achieve efficiencies. It might be a bit early yet, but I'm interested in some early thoughts about how we manage that messaging through the organisation. I don't know who wants to pick that up, so it might not be for Heleth.
I can start from where I engage with people. So I do attend many of the different forums, the same as Muriel was saying that Gareth has been to various committees and areas. I did go to the area medical forum quite recently to go through the financial position, and clearly there is a contention there and a clash between performance, clinical quality, expectations versus the financial position, and it's really difficult sometimes to engage with people on how their actions impact the finances. I think sometimes it's seen as being the board's issue to resolve rather than individuals. So for me, part of that is trying to get people engaged in how the actions link into the consequence, I guess, and how we have a personal responsibility to ensure that we are delivering value for money, best efficiency, in the same way as we would our own personal finances. So that's part of the messaging, I guess, is around that, trying to get that accountability and responsibility. But it is challenging. I think just the fact that the figure is so large, it makes it difficult to break it down, which is where I guess the 3% makes it a little bit easier, because people can at least get in their heads how they could make a smaller improvement rather than the full 10% gap that we potentially have. So it's trying to work through that narrative, but the narrative isn't really changing. The difference for next year, which is quite dramatic, is that clear statement that there is no brokerage, and that will make quite an impact, I think, if we do have to report a deficit in our accounts, because again, this year, hopefully, with all of the things balancing, then we won't have to do that. But I welcome other colleagues to come in and give their views of how that feels within their services.
Thank you, Heleth. That's really helpful. Gareth, please.
Yeah, I think it's absolute responsibility for us all in terms of both within our own areas, but also how we work corporately to support things, or board-wide is probably a better way of putting it. So I think, articulating that we've got a number of programs that have a kind of medium to longer term effect, I think helps people feel less paralyzed. So I think the work, because I think when it's a size of problem, it's quite easy to almost do the ostrich approach and stick your head in the sand and saying, I can't do anything about it. So I think there's the work that's progressing around our transformation programs and really crystallizing them is really helpful and important. And as Heleth articulated there, that helps us probably get into some of the conversations about what are the options and the trade-offs and the impacts of those programs from a cost, quality, clinic and risk perspective. So that it's an enabling structure, if you like. There's a lot of work being done around value and efficiency, and kind of which aligns to that. So, for example, really getting to the detail around supplementary staffing and understanding what we can do around that. And I suppose it's helping people sort of engage with it, but in a kind of, so it's not scary. That's probably the best way of putting it. So it feels that they've got tangible things that they can do. So I think I shouldn't use the word, but it is a bit of a journey. And I think that's part of it, is just sort of saying we've been able to demonstrate we've got rigor of both progressing our approach and delivering on what we've said we're going to deliver already. So, and I think actually what we've seen over the course of the last year, if I take the area I've been involved in a lot, supplementary staffing, we've still got a way to go, but we have definitely made inroads this year. And I think something about celebrating success and saying, look, it's not the whole story, but we've made a big difference in terms of some of the savings we've made. And that is actually by people engaging in the rigor and process of looking at other alternatives, other things we can do within our service, other things we can do directly. But the thing we needed to do was put some process around that to enable people to have the data, to have some scrutiny, oversight of it, to challenge people. So that's what we've done over the course of last year, and it's starting to bear fruit. That doesn't take away from the fact we've got bigger issues around workforce availability that will still be a challenge. And then again, that's the next stage for us, which is, okay, so how can we think differently about workforce? And how can we think about potentially different service models that might mean that we can also have a different type of workforce? So it is really complex. And I think part of it is probably a narrative is probably the best way of describing it, rather than a clear comms plan, if you like. It's a number of different conversations we all need to keep progressing in the organisation to explain it in different ways so people understand it from different perspectives. And I think the fact that Hella's been around multiple forums, we've all been around multiple forums, that's how you do it, I think, is by having that conversation.
No, that's helpful. Thanks, Gareth. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to go around and engage with people. I think that's really important. Fiona, I'll bring you in. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. So again, I suppose just adding to the conversation, really, that what was the line that we won't have brokerage next year is a very stark one, and Helen's, I think, already outlined the feeling that we get when we read a statement like that. There is some nuance in that we are being asked to improve our position next year. Nobody at this stage has said we need to resolve our position in a single annual cycle. Now, those may seem to be in contrast with each other or mutually exclusive. So I think we need to work through with our colleagues what they're looking for. I suppose for me that thought is then what next, and how do we communicate that? And I suppose for me the way I frame thinking about that is what's in our control, what's within our local control that we can take ownership of, that can help us to move forward with trying to become a more sustainable organisation. And some of that, I think Helen and Gareth have already outlined, that we're not coming from a standing start. We've been working really hard throughout this year within the value and efficiency work streams, but also within our strategic STAG group, as we call it, the Strategic Transformation Group, to identify, clarify and progress projects that we think are either bringing that incremental value and efficiency change or are going to be more of a significant project and scale change, utilising the strategy that we currently have together, We Care, but also starting to look ahead at how we might think about the next strategy that's going to come beyond that, and how we target population health and prevention approaches, which we know are often very, very good for providing good outcomes for people, but can often be delivered in a more cost-effective way because they're harnessing the power that's within our individuals, our families and our communities, as well as what we have to bring forward as a health board. So again, I'm not wanting to steal Tim's thunder. There's plenty of suggestions that he has for us within his public health report that's coming later on the agenda. But we know that the national intention, as outlined by the First Minister yesterday, is to push harder towards that prevention approach and that population health approach. And I think as an organisation, with the strength of communities that we have, Philip was talking about that earlier in relation to his work within a local CPP approach, we're really well placed to utilise the assets and strengths that we have from our communities to do things differently. So that's probably not the most synthesised messaging in terms of how we'll tell our staff and our communities about this, but I think the bones of what we need are there, and we need to just work together with government to understand what that means, and then I think we can convey that more effectively to staff and to other stakeholders. Thanks.
No, that's really helpful. Thanks, Fiona. And I'm glad you said at the end there are other stakeholders, because I was thinking, you know, there's a part in this about how we support our staff to understand this and work with us on it, but also in how we communicate this to our communities and our other stakeholders, you know, in a way that keeps us all pulling on the same end of the rope and staying in that kind of that constructive space. So we look forward to that. And sorry, we've gone slightly off kilter, but I think that's a helpful perspective for us at this point in the year, given where we are in terms of that changed position for this year, and indeed what we're being asked to do for next year and beyond. So I think that's some helpful context for us. Does anybody have any other questions for Heleth or others, either on the month 8 position or on the budget planning that we've just talked about there? Nope. Okay, lovely. So we were being proposed a limited assurance and asked to examine and consider the implications of the paper. So I think we've done that. If everybody's content, good. Great. Let's take a break. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, but that's fine. Let's take 15 minutes. See you back here with some refreshments. Thank you.